This is a really cool trick. So like if you don't want to open any other text editor, you can just use a text editor inside Chrome. So I'll share this later. But so yeah, I was starting with, so there's a var keyword. So var keyword in JavaScript is used to initialize variables. So now we can see that variable A is initialized. Okay, but var keyword has a problem which I'll come to later. So there is also a let keyword. Now that defines the value of B, and there is also a const keyword. Okay, so what's the difference between these three types of initialization is? So basically, so the first difference is between let and const. So the variable B can be changed. So you can make that to 8. And now the B's values gets changed. But if you try to change the value of C, it will give an error. So this is how errors show up in console. And basically that's the difference between let and const. And there is a var keyword. So in var also you can change the value. So this is what happens when you change the value for the var variable. So this is, yeah, you can see the value of A gets changed. But the second main difference between var and let and const is the scope. So now I'll give you an example. Yep, I'll just copy this from here. And yep, now I'll paste it here. So let's go over this example. I'll just remove the comments. Okay. So this is the code. If true, then there's a something initialized with var, something initialized with let, and something initialized with const. And let's try this out. Right. Okay, so here is our sample code. And so does anyone want to guess what will happen?
I guess the
All
var
will be
one would.
printed.
Uh, I guess the var would not be printed as the var is like not in global scope. So like the var name will
Okay,
not print. I guess.
okay, that doesn't happen. So I'll tell you what happens. I'll just show you. So the var keyword gets printed. So which was the name, which was gets printed, but the let and const don't get printed. So the reason why this happens is, so var has a global scope, but let and const have a local scope. So this is basically first important topic of the day, scopes. So now if you run the same example, like you just do the console log inside, it will type this. Now everything gets printed. But the important point is that if you use let or const, then it will only have the scope inside the brackets. Like it can be brackets for an if statement, it can be brackets for a for loop or any other brackets inside any function. Then like you can just use let and const, and you should use this. Like if you don't use this, you can get bugs, and those are really hard to fix and reproduce and just figure out what is happening. So this is a really important topic. So this was scopes. So yep, we covered this. Then there is something called an object in JavaScript. And let's try this. So what are different data types? Does anyone know what data types JavaScript supports? So there's obviously the number data type which we used. So C is a number. Does anyone want to answer that? Like, it's okay if you're wrong. If you try and if you're wrong, then you'll remember it always. If you try and if you're correct, then you'll still like have a memory of that. But if you don't try, then you'll have no memory and you will easily forget what I'm explaining to you. So you should all try if you can hear me. So what are other, like, can you hear me first of all?
Yeah, actually, we are typing in the chat. So,
Okay, I am not seeing the chat. Like, it's better if you speak because I'm not seeing the chat right now. Okay. Yep. Good answers. Okay, so there's obviously number, but there's a not a number type. NaN. So anything which is not a number is not a number. So there's a function called isNaN, and you can just type any string. So string is not a number. That's why it's true. And 3 is a number, so it's not a number. And then there's a Boolean type. So false is not a number. But yeah, JavaScript is tricky that way. So I'll give you a very good example that you'll always remember this NaN. So let me turn on my caps lock. So I'll type this here first. So there's B plus A plus, maybe some of you have seen this. So does anyone know what will be the output for this? I will not wait for you guys, but I will just try this out. So did that make sense? What happened?
Because of that plus plus, it printed NaN, or like some,
Yes.
is there some? Okay.
Yes. So I made some sort of mistake here, but it would have printed banana otherwise. And this is really strange logic. But this plus plus turns out to be NaN. Actually, I had to write 3 pluses. Then it would have, no, it doesn't work like that. I don't know what mistake I'm making, but yeah. There is an NaN type. And then I've covered Boolean. Then there's a undefined type. And there's a null type. And undefined and null are different in JavaScript. If you will understand, like, the more you use JavaScript, the more strange it will seem. So it's false. So those are not equal. That's also true. So there's a double equal to and there's a triple equal to. So this is very important concept again in JavaScript. So there's a triple equal to, which basically means it's a strict comparison. and there is a double equal to, which is a not so strict comparison. Like basically 0 is a falsy value. So there is a function which checks boolean. So 0 is a falsy value. Empty string is also false. Like, but string, if it has something, then it's a true value. Okay. And now undefined is also false. And null is also false. So if you do these sorts of comparisons with a double equal to, then it will match the falsy values. So this comes out to be the case. So this is also a very important topic. You should know. So the best practice is you should always use the triple equal to comparison and not rely on this in your if statements. Like the more you use JavaScript, the more you'll learn. Okay, so that was about data types. Then there's a data type called object and array. So there's an array, like you can create an array, choose numbers. So this is an array, and you can use a const to define the array to a variable. And same way you can use an object. So this is an object, like maybe some of you are familiar. So this is how you create an object, and this is how you create an array. So, and what is wonderful about JavaScript is everything is an object. Everything can be an object, not necessarily. So this is your homework. So you will learn like when every data type can be an object and when not. So you can try that because it's very tricky to explain. If you know something about it, it will be much easier to explain. So maybe you can try to find out yourself. So okay, so this is a notation where you can create an array. So there is another notation where how you can create an array, which is this. So you have created an empty array, then you can use the array.push function to push elements into that array. I pushed 1, 2, and 3. So then if I check W becomes an array. Okay, but there is an easier notation which I just told you about, where you can just change the array like this. So this is the forward notation, and this is a shortcut. Like you had to create an array earlier, you had to create an array like this, but then JavaScript advanced and they created this shortcut to create an array. And then came ES6. So I'll tell you a little bit of background. So the actual name of JavaScript is ECMAScript. And so I hope most of you know that JavaScript has no relation with Java. So did you guys all know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the creator of JavaScript just used a popular name for his own language, and that's how JavaScript came to be. But the real name of that language is ECMAScript, and the latest addition to that language was ECMAScript 6, ES6 it's called. So basically we are now on ES6, but ES6, even after ES6, there are a lot of versions and of JavaScript, and which are on a trial basis, and so there's that. I'll not explain further. So this is a very good conversation. I can go into the history of JavaScript and why it is the way it is. But I will not go into that today. So we'll have to cover a lot of topics, and we are very short on time. So this is a notation where you can create the array in forward, but there is a notation where you can get the objects from the array. So now if you can, did anyone understand what I did there? Hopefully someone understood.
I guess you assigned the number to the variables, I guess.
Yep. So what this is called, it's called destructuring. So this notation is called structuring. So you can structure the array like this. So then you can destructure the array. Then you, in destructuring, you pick the first element, second element, and then you can keep on picking the elements from the start. And then when you are done, you can just use another variable to for all the rest of the elements. So what I did was x was declared as 1, y was declared as 2, and the rest of the array which had 3 and 4. Okay, so this is also a very important topic, destructuring. And the same way we can just also destructure objects. Okay, so what happened here, I had already used a, so I have to give another name. So I structured an object. A is this object. So object is basically a key and a value. And now I can just destructure. Okay, so now I'm trying to destructure, and what actually should have happened was I should have gotten the value of x and y, but I have already used the variable x somewhere in before. So I have to give it another name. So I can do this using this notation. So now I have the variable xx, which is value 1. It was earlier x, and I have the variable yy, which has value 2. So this is called destructuring. Like if you are just seeing what destructuring is, so it's okay, you can go back and just try more examples, and then you'll be more clear on what destructuring is. So there's that. And then there are functions which we can call. So let's see, we had created an array. Yep, we have created an array. So we have very useful functions inside the array. So I'll cover 3 of those, and you can look up more if you want. So there is first of all a parameter for an array. So this is also again very important concept. So you can use e dot length to find the length of the array. And now if you know about this, array is also an object. So array is an object with keys 0, like with the numbers as keys, and there is a special key in the array which has the length. So if you use e dot push, and then we check what e is. So e has all the keys and it has a length. And now we can also again use destructuring. So we destructured the length from the array E. So we got the length 5. And so there's that. But so the length is very interesting because we can change the length. It's not a read only parameter, it's read write. So what happens if I use e dot length equal to 100? Now if I try E is an array with 100 with first 5 elements set and the rest of the elements empty. So if I try E n, so it comes out to be undefined. So all the other elements will be undefined. But I can set E n equal to, then if I check E, then it will show up like this. So we have all these elements. Okay. And now there's a question for you guys. So what will happen if I set E 1000 to something? Now what happens to the array's length? Can anyone guess?
Array length may increase to 1000.
Okay, let's check. Correct. Now it has got the length. So if we assign any random array index, then the array size will increase. And we can also delete the entire array. We can just do e dot length equal to 0. And then if we see e, it becomes an empty array with length 0. So this is very interesting. In JavaScript, array dot length is read write. So if you go and share this with your classmate, most of them won't know this. It's a very interesting topic. So you guys can be cool for once and share something interesting. So then there's functions. So in JavaScript, basically there are two types of functions. Does anyone have any question up till now?
So what will happen like when we make e dot length is equals to 0, like to the size of the array?
So I just showed you. So it gets deleted. So the array
Uh,
is cleared.
so like there should be some storage in the memory of for the array.
Yeah.
So what will happen to that?
So it goes into heap and like it's cleared after some time. So like we
Oh,
can't do any, like we can't recover lost memory.
yeah. Okay.
It gets lost. So what I was going to show you is functions. So this is the syntax for creating functions. Okay, then we can execute the function. It gives an answer we want. But now we can do something interesting with function syntax. We probably won't have time to cover everything, but I'll try to cover as many topics as I can. So someone was asking what is the triple dot operator. Hopefully this will work. I made a mistake. Okay. So what happened here? Does anyone have any idea? So basically, if you don't, it's okay. So what I did here is I assigned the variable number of parameters. So let's say I don't know, like if I only have 2 parameters or 3 parameters, then I can just use this triple dot notation, and it's called the spread operator, as someone pointed out. And what happens is, now what I get is an array of parameters. So if I just try to execute parameters, then I would have known that this is an array, and I had used the join operator to print the contents of the array. So this is a way I can just create a function with unknown number of parameters, and this is very useful in React. And the same way, so let's say I have an array E, okay, so I can execute this log function with all the parameters inside an array using the same spread operator. So my function definition is console.log the entire array. So what happened is the entire array got logged. So this is how we use the spread operator. And now there are, as the syntax evolved, like writing the whole function keyword every time was not very useful, and all programmers are lazy. So they created a new syntax which is called arrow functions. So if I execute this function, I will get the same result. So this is about the arrow functions. Now there is something interesting, an interesting concept called hoisting. So does anyone know what that is? You have read about it or not? And feel free to unmute yourself.
It is something like you can use the variable without declaring. Means you can declare the variable after using it.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So let's remove this for now. So see this example I have typed out. So I have used console.log and I have used the function which is not declared yet. I have declared the function later. So what should happen here?
Undefined may print. It may give
Yeah. Like it should have given an error. So I will go back. I will use a variable. Okay. So with the variable, it doesn't work. It gives an error. Okay. So if I declare the variable before, it is already defined. So I'll rename the variable. So if I declare the variable before, it works. Okay. So what happens if I use a function? Just paste it again. Okay. So I'll use a function. So what happens is I do get the actual function definition. And this is because in JavaScript, function definitions are hoisted. So what JavaScript compiler does is it like reads the whole file, and all the functions it brings, all the function declaration it brings to the top. So like it will read the file from start, and then it will encounter a function called read. So it will store the name read. So read is a function, the definition is later. So that's why it will not give an undefined error. It will know that read was a function, and when it will reach the definition, it will use that definition. It will store the reference to that definition. Like it will not like wait for the function to come to that. Like it will store the reference to the definition, and it will use that definition. So but this only happens in normal functions, and in arrow function it doesn't happen. Like if we try this, then it stops because blue is not defined. I tried blue. Blue was an arrow function, and it didn't happen. Then I have to declare this again. So I will execute this. Now it happened. Now the blue definition we received because it was declared before using its value. So did anyone understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully you guys understood. So this is the concept of hoisting. And the very important thing to notice, only function definitions are hoisted and arrow function definitions are not hoisted. So then there is something called a callback. Okay. So basically look at this code. So we have this code. I have created this function myDisplayer, and what it does is you give it some value and it adds 5 to the value and console logs that value. And then there is a function called myCalculator in which I pass 2 numbers and this function. So it adds both the numbers and calls that function. So what happens is, like here it receives 5 plus 5 and then it executes this function and you get 15. So did that make sense? Anyone? Okay. So yeah, this is the concept of callback functions. And this is also a very important concept, but we'll come to that later if we have time. Okay. So then we can cover classes. Okay. So before that, there is also a switch case. And what is interesting in switch case in JavaScript is that we can use conditions. So consider this function, like we are using switch case, and we are passing it true inside the switch case, but then in each case we are checking the condition. Okay, so let's try different values of get category. 25 it will give young, and if I type A, then it's not an age. So this is very interesting. You can use it a lot, and like this is much better than the switch case in some other languages. Like some languages allow this, but JavaScript does, so you have to remember that.
Oh,
Okay.
Chaitanya, someone is asking you to explain it again. Prashant, you can unmute yourself and ask your question actually.
Yeah, I'm actually not reading the chat very regularly, so yeah, so I can explain it once more. So I have this definition of get category. Inside,
Sir, I am asking about that callback function, not sir. I understood that this switch function. I was asking about that callback.
okay, callback function. Okay, I can go over that. Okay, so let's say we, I'll explain. Let's try some other example. So this is the sum function, and if you understood what happens in this function, how will we define this? Will this work? What do you guys think? Okay, this works. So this is a magic sum function in which if you provide any number of parameters, it will, the eval function basically just evaluates some expression. So if you want to see what is happening under the hood, I can use a console.log. And then if I execute this, so I created this expression with params.join plus. So whatever parameters I passed, it created a 1 plus 2 plus 3, and then we get 6. So does the sum function make sense to whoever was asking?
Yes, sir.
Prashant. Okay. So this is the sum function. Now let's say we have a function that generates an array. Let's try a function. Okay. Let's try the for loop. I have to return the answer. Okay. So it generated an array, any random array. So, yep. So basically what happens is I have the sum function and I have this generate array function, which do two things. Like it creates a random array from for 10 numbers. So what callback function does is, so I can change the definition of generate array and pass in the sum function. It's a very difficult example I have chosen. Okay. It didn't work. Let's try once again. Okay.
Objectively, you might need to rename the sum.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that makes sense. This is still not working. Okay, I have to pass in the value. Now it worked. So, Prashant, did any of this make sense?
Yeah, sir. We push one function.
Yeah. Like we have created a function, and inside that function, like we have passed another function. Okay.
Yes,
So, and we can execute that function from inside that function.
sir. I got
Okay.
it. Yes, yes.
So, so the reason why I explained, like in JavaScript, you can do that. So there is something called the fetch, which I'll cover later. But basically, for like fetching data from some server, you have to use an API. Like, do you guys know about like what is API and what is server and what is all that? Like, who doesn't know what an API is? Like, which is totally fine. Like, not everyone knows. Okay. So someone knows. Okay, some people don't. So okay. So we'll cover this in a later session, not in the introduction to JavaScript session. So yep, we'll cover this later. So now we have 10 minutes. So I'll try to cover 3 main functions that you will use a lot. So let's go back to E, which is an array. And there is this function called filter. So what happened here is, so this is a arrow function with which takes an element and returns if element is greater than 2. So this is array.filter function, and which allows us to filter the elements. So we got all the elements which are greater than 2. So did the filter method make sense? Say yes or no.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this was the filter method.
Sir,
So filter
does
method,
item is a keyword or it's a
so you can actually use
variable?
anything. So you can use I, and it will just give it the same result. So item is not important. It's just like any name you can give it. So you can do that. So what the filter method does is, it takes an array and then gives us an array with removing some elements. Okay. Now there is another method. Okay. So now what this function does is it multiplies each element by 2. So it takes in an array and multiplies each element of the array into 2. So it gives another array. Okay. So this was the map function. So did that make sense? Like say yes or no?
Yeah, but can we use filter function for this for multiplying the array?
No. So filter function can only give the same elements and just remove some elements from that. So it will not change the array elements
Okay.
themselves. So the map function can change the array elements. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So another interesting thing we can do inside JavaScript is we can chain both these functions. So we got these two elements. So both these functions got executed one by one, and we can use as many functions. So there is a function called sum. So what this sum function does is it gives true if any of the elements match the condition. Like p dot sum if any element is greater than 10. So it will give false. But if we use less than 10, so it will give true because at least one element is less than 10. So did the sum function make sense?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Now there's this one was sum function. Down another is all function. All. It's not this. Let's see. I have to check the syntax. I've forgotten it. Every. Yeah. I was using all. But it's the every function. So if all the elements are less than 10, then it will give true. If some elements are not less than 10, like if all the elements are not less than 3, then it gives false. Like since we have 4 and we also have 3 which is not less than 3, 3 is equal to 3 but not less than 3. So because that way, so even not less than 4 will give false because 4 is not less than 4. So did the every method also make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we'll cover a tricky one. So let's see the definition of E dot reduce. So this is the most trickiest function. So okay. So what happened here? Does anyone know? Has anyone seen this function before? Reduce. You can speak if anyone wants. So who didn't understand the reduce method?
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Okay, that's very good. So I was expecting some of you will not get it. So what happens here is so what reduce method does is it takes an array, but it gives a value. Okay, so the earlier methods were taking an array and giving us a new array, and someone has asked like none of them modify the array. So yes, none of them modify the array, it gives us a new array. And so we can also chain these. But reduce method does not give an array, it gives a value. And what the value is, so let's see this. Okay. Okay, so who understood what happened here? Because I didn't understand. So we should not use this sum function. This is incorrect sum function. This is the correct sum function. Let's go back. Okay. So there is two parts to this reduce function. So one is this value, which is initial value. If you see here, it is written here, initial value and callback function. Okay, so this is a callback function. So we passed in a function and we passed in a value. So to explain it more clearly, we will modify this function and we'll write the full definition. Okay. Okay. Let's see what happened, how the function executed. So first we passed in the value 0. Okay. So we actually have 4 elements. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the current value. So basically we get the total value, which is 1. So actually it's not correct. Syntax. Okay. Let's execute this once again. Okay. So yeah. So we get 4 current values. So we have the E array. The E array is 1, 2, 3, 4. So does this make sense up till now? Please say yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the current values we will get 4. We will get 4 iterations. The loop 4 times, and the current value each time will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So did that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Hopefully it did. Okay. So and we are calculating the total, which is the ACC variable, and which will start with 0, and then we'll add 1. So the total will become 1. Then here total will be 1, but then we will add the current value, which is 2. So total will become 3. Okay. Then we will have 3 as the current value and 3 as the total value. Then we'll add both these values. So the total value will become 6. And then we will receive 4 as the current value and 6 as the total value, previous total value. Then we'll add both these. So the final result will get 10. So did that make sense? I hope it did.
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay. So this was the reduce. So if you learn this function, you will be ahead of so many other people. Because like most like get stuck with the reduce function. So This is a very useful function that you use sometimes. And I have used it like many times, and each time I have to see the syntax. So this is very useful if you understood this. So now we have already over time. So does anyone want to stay? I can continue and I can cover classes and all. Like if most of you want to leave, then we can stop here. So we are already over time. Okay, so I will continue. Like if anyone wants to leave, feel free to leave. So I'm trying to record, like probably I'll get the recording. So I will check if the recording is successful. Okay, so now we have covered the basic functions, and reduce was very important. So now we'll cover a very important topic before covering classes. So which is the this keyword. So does anyone know what the this? You can unmute yourselves.
Reference to current object.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, no one else. So no issues. So yeah, this keyword is, as its name suggests, the reference to the current context. And so like if I just type console.log this, what do you think will happen? I get this. I get the current window object. So like every JavaScript or every JavaScript console basically has a window object. So window is everything. Like inside window we have a document, and inside document we have all the tags, HTML tags, and inside window we have all the functions that we are using. So it is the main object in which everything is. So this was the window object, and this was the, like when we console.log this, what happens is we get the window object. Okay, so now what happens is if we have a function and inside the function we try console.log this, what do you think will happen if I press enter? Anyone? Any guesses?
Does it refer to the current function?
Like if I press enter, what will happen? Will anything happen?
No.
No, because it's just a function. When I'll execute the function, now it will happen. So this still refers to the window object. Okay. But now if I use the new keyword, now what happens? Now it refers to the current function. So the context changes when we execute a function with the new object. So did that make sense? Anyone?
Yeah.
Like it's okay if it didn't make sense. So let me try once again. So let's use the new keyword. What new keyword does is, new keyword allows us to make an object. If we use a function, like let's create a function person. and person has a first name and a last name. Okay. Okay. So if I type new person, remember person was a function, but if I type new person and if I give some first name, last name, I'll type my own name. So now we get an object which is person object, and I mistyped first name here, but this is what I get. This is the syntax to create a new object. And if I try to print this, then this will point to person. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this was very important concept. So in React, you will use this. So it is very important that you figure out what this means in all sorts of contexts. So we can also create a class. And I will copy paste this. Okay. So I created a class user, and inside the class user, I have this function called log name, and which logs this. Okay. And I will type enter, nothing happens. Then I will do user1 equal to new user. And if I try user1 dot log name, now what will happen? I printed this. This points to the user class. So does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So we have already begun the concept of classes, and now we will modify the definition of this class. So if you have studied classes in other languages like C, C++, C doesn't have classes, C++ obviously. So classes have a very important function called constructor. Okay. So, and constructor, we can take some value and we can use that value. And we won't be doing anything for now, but we will take this and user1 equal to new user. Okay. So user1 has already been taken. Okay. So I created the user2, and the constructor didn't do much. It could have done a lot for us. So let's try again. Let's try to store the value of the name. I've initialized a variable name, and I will do this dot name equal to name. Okay. And then I will try user3. And I will try user3. What is it? User3 is this object which has this, a name parameter which has the value name, because I initialized it using the constructor. So does this make sense up till now?
Yes.
So what will happen if I do user3.log name? Should show. So I can use the value of name. So it's the parameter. But user.name will be nothing. So user.name is just user. And what happens if I do user3.log name? It's a function, I have to execute that. Then this will print this keyword, like this.